I'm going to identify the 6 most common barriers to effective listening so you can overcome them. Listening is frequently mentioned as one of the top communication skills that professionals should have but often lack, and I'm going to help you fix that. This video is part 1 in a 4-part series on active listening skills. I posted some videos on listening years ago, but it's time for an update. Many people I know desperately want to be good listeners, but they can't seem to do it because of these 6 barriers. So let me know in the comments section which of these causes you the most trouble personally. The first barrier is distractions. Clearly, you won't listen as well if things are distracting you, like your phone, which is the number 1 distraction these days. Noises coming from another room or from outside can distract you. Music in the background can be a distraction. A TV or other monitor in the space can be a distraction visually. Other distractions have nothing to do with sound, like cold air conditioning or a draft that's blowing on you. That's my wife's top distraction. She can't think about or listen to anything else if there's cold air blowing. Whatever the distractions you face, here's a tip for reducing these. You have to get assertive about reducing these distractions. Close doors to block noise, move locations, choose a seat that doesn't face a screen. I never pick a seat that's facing a screen when I'm out to dinner or at an important meeting. Slide your chair closer to sit in a way so you don't have as much in your field of vision to distract you. And don't just try harder to stay off your phone. If you're serious about listening better, research shows that you have to turn off your phone and put it 100% out of sight, like in your pocket or in your bag, to improve your listening. The next barrier is preoccupation. This is related to distractions, but preoccupation happens in your mind. You might start a new conversation with a person, but you're still preoccupied by something you were already thinking about before that conversation. It's hard to let that first thought go and focus entirely on listening because you're preoccupied. You could be anxious about something. Maybe it's social anxiety, or maybe you're anxious about something else that's preoccupying your mind. One major preoccupation I have personally is that I'm always thinking about what I'm about to do next. What's coming up after this conversation? What's coming up later in the day? Those responsibilities make me focus on the future, and they preoccupy me. They prevent me from focusing on the moment and being a good listener. You may also get preoccupied by something the other person said. We call this drift. So the other person might say a word, or it could be any word that reminds you of something else in your mind, and that drifts away in that direction while they continue to talk. Preoccupation is a tough nut to crack, but it all comes down to mental discipline. The moment you realize you're thinking about something else, you have to re-engage in active listening. Force yourself to make eye contact. Focus on what they're saying in the moment. Something that helps me is I try to ask a question or make a brief comment about what the other person's saying to keep myself actively engaged and focused. If you're routinely preoccupied, you're likely listening too passively. So when I listen, I ask questions or focus enough to make a comment, and that usually snaps me right back into good listening mode. The third barrier is listening too much to the details. When we get too focused on the details and try to follow every single move in the conversation, we can lose sight of the big picture that the other person is trying to communicate. I've noticed that people who are the most detail-oriented have difficulty following the overall point. So the tip for this is to give yourself permission to focus on the overall big picture of what the person is saying. Let yourself off the hook for keeping track of every detail. Remind yourself that you can always ask follow-up questions later if you're missing something. And when you're listening for the overall message, you're much more likely to tune in and grasp what the other person's saying. A fourth barrier is when the topic itself is boring or uninteresting to you. I've seen this happen a million times in group professional settings. People listen very carefully when it's a topic they care about, and then they start looking at their devices the moment the subject changes to something that doesn't directly involve them. The solution is to check and change your mindset. Develop a sense of curiosity. Make your mind up that you're going to take an interest in what the other person is saying. I heard the comedian Jerry Seinfeld talk about having conversations and listening to people at social gatherings. He said that if you're talking to somebody who is completely boring, you can still look for and find something interesting about almost anybody as long as you decide to take an interest. Many people consider curiosity or taking an interest in the other person a choice, in other words. So if you're not really into the subject the other person is talking about, decide to be curious, and that will help your listening. The fifth barrier to effective listening is called the rebuttal tendency. And this is a big one. Instead of listening carefully to understand, we spend our mental focus trying to figure out what we're going to say next. As the well-known author Stephen Covey once said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. He was talking about the rebuttal tendency. You can almost see this sometimes when you're talking to somebody else. They look like they're revving up their engine, just waiting to jump in. But when they do, it's almost impossible for people to listen really well this way to what the other person's actually saying. I've noticed many times when people have the rebuttal tendency, they end up saying things that don't align with where the conversation has gone because they've missed important information while they were calculating what they wanted to say next. They might think they're coming up with something clever, like a comeback or a thoughtful statement, but they end up coming across like they're not following along that well. So the tip has two parts. First of all, make sure you invest your time listening to what the other person is actually saying. Don't try, in other words, to figure out what you want to say next. Just let yourself off the hook for saying anything right away. The second half of the tip is to commit ahead of time to pausing for a few seconds once the other person has finished their talking turn. If you commit to pausing ahead of time, you'll untrain yourself to feel like you have to jump in as soon as they're finished. In my experience, the other person will appreciate that you have paused and taken the time to let them finish. And you usually only need a few seconds to figure out what you want to say in response after that pause because you've been listening carefully. The sixth barrier is that sometimes the speaker, the actual person, is boring, uninteresting, distracting. Maybe they're speaking, for example, in a monotone voice. Maybe they're saying or using other fillers so much that it distracts you. They could be a soft talker and they're just not engaging enough to keep your interest. There's something about them you just can't get over. So the tip for this is whatever their shortcoming, decide to give them grace. Allow them in your mind not to conform to your standards. In the interest of your effective listening, let them off the hook. Have compassion for them. Remind yourself that they're only human and they're likely doing their best. Let go of all expectations that you have on them to be a good communicator, and instead put your focus on their message, on their words. Here's a summary of the top 6 barriers to effective listening and the tips I gave. Let me know which one of these barriers causes you the most trouble, and feel free to share your own tips in the comment section below to help overcome them. Feel free to take a look at my page of full free resources on my website. I'll put a link to that in the description below. And again, this is part 1 in a 4-part series on active listening skills. Part 2 comes out a week after this one, and we'll focus specifically on tips to be a more active listener. Till next time, thanks, God bless, and I will see you soon.